So Roy had, a plethora of talent. Mad Dog Vachon helped get Pat Patterson into San Francisco. Originally, he was going to be Roy's tag team partner, and Roy just never really came out of it, and Roy just stayed behind the scenes. But in comes Pat, and Pat always tells a story about the first time that he met Roy. And, Pat was a gay man that it wasn't cool to be gay in the 60s and 70s. All right. You didn't come out and tell people that you were gay, you hid. And for the most part, kept that to yourself. And in the business, Pat had a reputation, an impeccable reputation from the standpoint of being a great worker and a great guy and honest, and did very well for you when he came in. And Roy Shire says, "Yeah, I hear a lot of rumors." And Pat was like, "Well, let me just forget about the rumors. Let me tell you exactly what it is. I'm gay. I've got a friend. His name is Louis. He lives with me. And if you've got a problem with that, I'll leave right now. But never enters into my business, and I want to live my life, and I'm going to live my life." It's like, "Whoa, all right then," And Pat was just completely honest with him, and Roy was like, "Okay," because Pat was a great worker, and he would
Right.
go to Pat for finishes, and he would go to Pat and say, "What do you think about this guy?" Because Pat had worked a little bit, and Pat was a mainstay. God, I think he was there 14 years on and off, but Pat was a megastar. First time he ever bought a house, and bought this big, beautiful house out on a hill somewhere. And, to him, that was success. I don't think Pat ever envisioned himself leaving San Francisco because he loved it. He loved the area, and he liked working for Roy. I don't think he liked Roy all that much, but San Francisco was exciting. It wasn't the, I'll call it the AWA, just straight wrestling. It was exciting. They had a little guy. You could have a little fun, and brought in guys like Rocky Johnson, and brought in people like, you're looking at Roy Shires and the Bat, and I think the Bat. See, now I can't remember his name. Marino, I believe, but it's a place where you had Pat and you had Ray Stevens. Ray Stevens was another blonde bomber, and Pat and Ray Stevens were one of the greatest tag teams in the history of the business ever. Today, they would be a top tag team. And you also had people like Peter Maivia. Peter, coming over from the islands, and Peter was a huge star there because there was a big Samoan community in San Francisco and in the Pacific Northwest. So Peter was, man, he was a god to them. And he represented the Samoan people. That's where Afa and Sika, as the story goes, was Pat and Peter had a match. Pat had screwed Peter in the match, and a riot ensues. And as they're fighting their way back to the dressing room, coming from above in the vomitory and from the bleachers, here comes Afa and Sika, and jumped off of the vomitory down on to Pat and Ray, and they had to fight their way through. And there were these two crazy guys. Peter was able to go and talk to them and like, "Guys, calm down. I'm okay. I'm gonna be okay. Let me fight my fights. You guys don't get involved. It's bad, because the only thing that's gonna happen is you're gonna get thrown in jail. This is gonna be bad for you. I can do this. I'll overcome. If you believe in me." Often Sika became friendly with Peter. Peter, helped get them into the business and get them to train and what have you. And that was the beginning of Afa and Sika. So it was, but Peter had that power with the Samoan people, because it was like, Peter went back and was made a high chief and did the tattoo gimmick and all that stuff. Damn near died getting the chief tattoos. but he was a mega star in the Pacific Northwest, or in San Francisco and that area. You also had Rocky Johnson. Rocky came in and Rocky, man, set the place on fire because Rocky was as charismatic as they got. And the beautiful thing about San Francisco, man, was that crew, Pepper Gomez. Oh my God, just the stars that came out of there. They all were very close. I would go through Pat's scrapbooks and his photo albums and stuff and see the parties at Via's house and Peter playing the ukulele and everybody around. And it was just a who's who of the wrestling business. Now, Roy didn't like heels and baby faces fraternizing outside, but when you would go to each other's house, that was different. That was okay. And it was just such a camaraderie and a brotherhood in San Francisco that everybody, it was tight knit. It was solid. They took care of one another. Pat was able to go babyface, heel, babyface, just several times, and they always bought it. And it was run, and it was tough to make it there because you had to satisfy one guy, Roy Shires, and Roy was tough, and he was good payoff guy, not great, but it was solid. And it was another one that you knew if you got over in San Francisco that pretty much you could get over any place else. And you had steady work, and Roy was one. He would take, he would take ideas from Pat. He would take ideas from guys that would offer, but for the most part, Roy wanted it his way. And if Roy made every town, every night, and ran them. And Pat would tell the story about one, like the one time that Roy was not going to make a spot show somewhere, and he gave Pat the finishes. And Pat decided to have some fun and do some different things and all this shit. And he said he got his ass chewed out because it wasn't exactly as Roy had told him to do. So Roy ran with an iron fist, and I think that is what eventually ran Roy out of business, was no flexibility. When it came time to, the business is changing. You either change or you die. And Roy didn't want to change, and Roy wanted to keep running it the way that he ran it from day one.